This Berlin village has a dark secret. Tucked between idyllic pine woods, there are almost no signs of its dark past. Even though it recently caught international attention, a lot of Berliners still don't know the true story. So today, I'm heading down to Berlin Southwest to take a closer look.
What seems like a quiet village on the outskirts of Berlin was actually constructed as a gated community for the elites of the SS, instigated by Heinrich Himmler himself.
Before exploring the settlement further, let's look at how it all began. The development of this territory took place between 1937 and 1939, designed by architect Hans Gerlach. The settlement consists of over 300 houses, surrounded by dense pine trees and close to the popular lakes of Krumme Lanke and Schlachtensee. Being part of the master race didn't save you from having to pay rent. Since the buildings were not owned by the Reich, rents varied between 100 and 130 Reichsmarks.
So the village was organized depending on rank. So the higher you ranked in the SS, the nicer your apartment was, or your house.
The apartments that were designated for the lower ranks of the SS comprised of a maximum of 2.5 rooms. Meanwhile, the highest ranking officers were granted the privilege of moving into luxury single-family homes situated deep within the quiet forest. This is also where some of the worst Nazi criminals lived. The SS Oberführer Joachim Mogrowski lived on the street called Himmelssteig. He was the chief of the Hygiene Institute of the Waffen-SS, personally orchestrating horrific, lethal medical experiments on prisoners. Walking through the settlement, I had to think of the movie The Zone of Interest. You can imagine the families living normal, quiet lives and swimming in the nearby lakes, while their husbands were out working for the Nazi machinery of death.
The Waldsiedlung Krumme Lanke is very much in line with the ideology of the Nazis. So the blood and soil ideology of a agrarian type society, being close to German woods and German nature, and living in small communities, being far away from the city that was seen as evil and decadent.
The houses are designed in the traditionalist Heimatschutzstil. The simply designed buildings are characterized by plain stucco, gable roofs, beaver-tailed tiles, wood-clad dormers, shutters, and earthy colors. The distinct Bauhaus-inspired flat roof from the progressive functionalist Neues Bauen that defined Weimar Republic housing was made gone with. To the Nazis, a flat roof was the ultimate symbol of cultural Bolshevism and non-German, often called Jewish or nomadic, influence. Conversely, the grid windows and rustic shutters gave the impression of a small, traditional peasant cottage, creating an illusion of humble agrarian harmony where Aryan families derived their strength directly from the German soil and forest. Residents walked down streets systematically named after the ideals of a loyal Nazi life. Im Kinderland, In Children's Land, and Himmelssteig, Heaven's Trail, still exists today.
Well, the original plans actually called for a community center, a daycare center for children, a casino, but because the SS and the regime didn't want to assume any financial costs, it didn't get constructed.
When the Nazi regime finally collapsed in May 1945, a wave of panic swept through the settlement. Numerous families committed suicide, drowning themselves in the Krumme Lanke.
So after the war, the victims of the Nazis actually moved into these homes, which is crazy to think that in the same homes where the perpetrators lived, only a couple months after the war was over, the victims moved in. So they were dining at the same tables, using the same rooms. But yeah, the circumstances after the war were so dire that the Allies didn't have a different choice.
Years later, some returning former SS members knocked on the doors, trying to reclaim their former apartments. The settlement is also emblematic of how Germany as a whole dealt and still deals with its dark past. For decades after the war, a heavy silence settled over the pine trees. A historical reckoning didn't begin until the 1980s. In 1992, the entire settlement was placed under strict historical monument protection. Since then, debate among its residents has been ongoing. While some favor a more transparent approach, others fear that the neighborhood could become a pilgrimage site for neo-Nazis. To this day, only a single information stele exists, tucked away on the edge of the settlement. Inside the actual neighborhood, there is absolutely nothing to remind you of its Nazi-era origins. The village remains one of the most coveted, expensive, and peaceful residential areas in Berlin. Yet, beneath the quiet rustle of the pine trees, it stands as a permanent chilling reminder of how easily absolute evil can mask itself as a quiet, peaceful village in the woods.